Video contains violent content, details that are not suitable for common perception. Please consider before watching. Chapter 193. The Test 4. A Dead Man Who Should Have Died. At the words of the middle-aged man with a long scar above his left eyebrow, the society leader, who had released his support and caught his breath, asked in puzzlement, Ha, a dead man who should have died. Literally. The society leader's eyes narrowed. If you think about it in reverse, the phrase, a dead man who should have died, also means, not dead and alive. And if you delve deeper, it can also be interpreted as thought to be dead. The sickle-slaying demon. It was a nickname he had never heard of in the martial arts world. Just who was this sickle-slaying demon for him to say such a thing? If he personally mentioned this person, it couldn't be someone to just brush off. After being lost in thought for a moment, the society leader spoke. Answer me. Yes. Did you kill him directly? Yes, I ruptured his internal organs with a palm strike and pierced his chest where his heart is with this sword. The scarred middle-aged man held up the black sword that looked charred. At this, the society leader asked. With that extent of injury, he should have definitely died. Surviving was even more impossible. As if agreeing, the man nodded and answered. Yes, he should have died. But you're saying this because you think that child earlier might be the sickle-slaying demon who died by your hand? The possibility is extremely low. Then why are you doing this? It goes beyond resemblance, to the point where he looks like the same person. Looks like the same person? At those words, the society leader frowned. Then could it be? Society leader, let me say this in advance, but it's completely different from that. Different? Yes. Then is that really possible? That's why I'm also concerned. In the end, even the slightest possibility couldn't be ruled out. At this, the society leader stared intently at the man and asked, coughing. Cough, cough. Why did you kill that sickle-slaying demon? He was digging into our traces. At the middle-aged man's answer, the society leader's eyes turned strange. It was a kind of agitation. What was the meaning of "R" that caused him to react like this? Soon the society leader spoke. Digging into traces. Then that changes the story. Left guardian. Yes. Verify the truth about the death of that guy called the sickle-slaying demon. So far there was no connection other than the resemblance. Therefore the society leader requested confirmation. At this, the middle-aged man clasped his hands together in a formal gesture and answered. Understood. If there is even the slightest possibility of him being the sickle-slaying demon, what should be done? For the sake of the future, it would be better to deal with him immediately. After catching his breath for a moment, the society leader spoke in a murderous voice. No. But if that's the case, wait until he completes the mission. The man, understanding the society leader's intention to utilize him until the end, grinned and answered. I will do as you command. When Mok Jayongun and Siep Chun, one of the 5 tigers and the 3rd captain commander of the main building, and Mong Muyak, another member of the 5 tigers and the vice leader's son, were standing side by side. In front of them, vice leader Mong Xiaoqian, with his hands clasped behind his back, spoke. Since there was a delay and time is limited, I will now explain the mission. Mission. It was truly a troublesome situation. If it was a confidential mission important enough for the society leader to personally summon them and the vice leader to explain, it definitely wouldn't be an ordinary mission that could be taken lightly. Mok Jayongun glanced at Shadow Clan Master Huan Yixian, who was standing by the entrance, far behind vice leader Mong Xiaoqian. Seeing that even he, who was in charge of information and confidentiality, was kept at a distance, it could be inferred that this mission was not discussed with the Shadow Clan Master at all. If that's the case, it means the Shadow Clan Master cannot be trusted in this mission. Mok Jayongun could deduce this from the fragmentary information. At that moment, Vice Leader Mong Xiaoqian began the explanation. I will first talk about the objective of this mission. The goal is to abduct a person imprisoned in a certain place and bring them back to our sect. At those words, Siep Chun, the 3rd captain commander of the main building, lightly raised his hand and asked, Is the person we need to abduct a member of our sect? At that question, Vice Leader Mong Xiaoqian stared intently at Siep Chun and eventually answered, No. For now. If not, is it an enemy? At Siep Chun's follow-up question, The vice leader frowned and answered in a somewhat heavy voice. Whether the person being abducted is an enemy or ally is not something you should be concerned about. Your job is solely to use any means necessary for the mission and bring that person to the main building of our Heaven and Earth Society's inner fortress. Just who is it that information about the person to be abducted is restricted? Seop Chun spoke in a somewhat puzzled tone. That may be so, but I'm asking how we're supposed to abduct a person, not an object, with such limited information. At his words, Mok Jae-eun also nodded. Seop Chun's questioning was valid. At this, Vice Leader Mong Seocheon shook his head and answered the question. Information about the person to be abducted will be revealed once you leave the sect and arrive at the place where they are imprisoned. Once we arrive at the place? At those words, Mok Jae-eun realized. He didn't know who they were supposed to abduct, but it seemed that information about the person to be abducted shouldn't be leaked within the sect before they left for the mission. From this, two things could be inferred. Is it someone who could create negative public opinion? Judging from the society leader's personality, although he had a fickle side, he was quite authoritarian and tended to push through with what he wanted to do. If the society leader kept information confidential about the person he wanted to bring, there was a high probability that the executives or members of the Heaven and Earth Society would view it negatively. Second, spies. Revealing the information only after reaching the location of the target to be abducted was a precaution against the information being known to internal members. This could be to thoroughly maintain secrecy for the success of the mission, but conversely, it also meant that there could be spies within the inner fortress. Not even discussing the mission with the Shadow Clan Master could mean they judged that there might be spies even among the key executives. The corners of Mok Jae-eun's mouth twitched as his thoughts reached this point. Although all of this was mere speculation, if even a part of it was true, it had the potential to create a stir in this massive organization. At that moment, the vice leader said, "Any more questions?" "No." Swish. Realizing that further questioning would only confirm that information about the mission was restricted, Seop Chun lowered his raised hand, having nothing more to say. Then Vice Leader Mong Seocheon spoke with his arms crossed. "This mission will naturally be revealed later, but until then it requires confidentiality. So don't have too many doubts." "Understood." "Yes." Everyone answered simultaneously. Then Vice Leader Mong Seocheon continued. "The personnel deployed for the mission are divided into an advanced team and a follow-up team. The advanced team has already departed, so once you arrive, you will hear more details from them." Advanced team. It seemed there were more people they had to work with. Whatever the mission was, Mok Jae-eun hoped it would be something that could be completed as quickly as possible rather than being difficult. Of course, with only this fragmentary information, it was still impossible to gauge the situation. The first gathering point where the advanced team is waiting is Anak in Hunan Province. Anak. At those words, the eyes of the three people, including Mok Jae-eun, turned strange. That was because Anak in Hunan Province was right near Kaifeng 1, the capital where the Imperial Palace was located. If the first gathering point to meet up with the advanced team and receive information was Anak, then it's the capital. All three of them could guess the true gathering point for the mission. After the brief explanation of the mission was over, Shadow Clan Master Hwan Yisian, who had been waiting for Mok Jae-eun before departure, called him over with a gesture. Keeping a distance from the others, the two began a conversation. "Master. It has turned out quite coincidentally." "Yes." "Did you hear where the mission will be carried out?" "They didn't tell us. They only informed us of the first gathering point." "Is that so? Then the capital Kaifeng seems certain." At Mok Jae-eun's words, Shadow Clan Master Hwan Yisian smiled. It wasn't because he was his disciple, but this fellow was indeed clever. "Oh ho ho. That's right. It's Kaifeng. To be precise, it's the Imperial Palace in Kaifeng." At the mention of the Imperial Palace, Mok Jae-eun's eyes flashed with surprise. He had suspected it might be in the capital, but he didn't expect it to actually be the Imperial Palace. "There are eyes watching, so don't show any signs." "Understood. There's no time, so for now I'll inform you about our sect's spies in the Imperial Palace." "Thank you." In fact, the main reason why Shadow Clan Master Hwan Yisian and his disciple Mok Jae-eun were assigned to this mission was precisely this. If Mok Jae-eun, the successor of the Shadow Clan, was directly involved in the mission, the Shadow Clan's spies in the Imperial Palace would cooperate even more desperately. The involvement of Mong Muyak, the son of Vice Leader Mong Xiaoqian, was in a similar context. The spies of the society leader's direct subordinates managed by Mong Xiaoqian were also in the Imperial Palace, so they would obediently cooperate with Mong Muyak. Is there? Memorize it in your head. You can do it, right? Yes, I understand. And take this with you. The Shadow Clan master handed Mok Jiangun a jade token with a tiger engraved on it. What is this? If you have this token and the code I told you, they will cooperate without question. Yes. Mok Jiangun accepted the jade token. However, he felt something else on his palm as he received the token. It was a ring. It seemed to be a ring worn on the finger. It appeared to have been intentionally handed over hidden under the jade token. Shadow Clan Master Huan Yixian spoke in an even more whispering voice than before. It's the identification token of a member. Keep it with you. Why this? From now on, I will give you an order as a senior member of our order, not the Heaven and Earth Society. As a senior member? Mok Jiangun's eyes narrowed. Is this mission somehow entangled with the Fire Faith Order as well? While he was puzzled, Shadow Clan Master Huan Yixian quietly whispered, "The person you will be abducting in this mission is the Holy Guardian of our order." The Holy Guardian? He had heard about this from Huan Yixian before. In the Fire Faith Order, there were two highest positions, one being the sect leader and the second being the Holy Guardian, who communicated with the sacred fire and was in charge of rituals. However, according to what Huan Yixian had told him, the sect leader of the Fire Faith Order had lost his life, and the Holy Guardian's whereabouts were unknown. At this, Mok Jiangun quietly asked, "Why is the society leader looking for him?" It didn't make sense. Didn't he say that the Fire Faith Order had left the righteous path and was rejected by martial artists? Then why was the society leader of the Heaven and Earth Society trying to abduct the Holy Guardian of the Fire Faith Order? To Mok Jiangun's question, Huan Yixian answered, "I can't tell you the details now. However, the success or failure of this matter depends solely on you. What is the mission? If you succeed in the abduction in the society leader's confidential mission, before returning, smuggle out the Holy Guardian." At those words, Mok Jiangun's eyes turned strange. He had guessed that there might be conflicting issues at some point while pretending to be a member of the Fire Faith Order and having a foot in both camps, but he didn't expect it to come in this way. This has become troublesome. If he failed in the abduction or if something went wrong while smuggling out the abducted Holy Guardian, he could become a traitor to the Heaven and Earth Society. No, he would already be considered a traitor the moment he tried to smuggle him out. On the other hand, if he ignored the Shadow Clan Master's order, it would definitely lead to a difficult situation. It was truly a dilemma where neither choice was easy to make. What should I do? Whatever it was, it seemed the moment had come when a choice was necessary. While Mok Jiangun was conversing with Shadow Clan Master Huan Yixian, Vice Leader Mong Xiaoqian was also giving a secret order to his son Mong Muyak, in addition to information about the spies. Keep an eye on Mok Jiangun. Mok Jiangun, you mean? Yes, monitor his every move. Father, why? Who told you to address me like that in a formal setting? At the reprimand of his father Mong Xiaoqian, Mong Muyak lowered his head and answered, "I apologize, Vice Leader. But why are you giving such an order?" To verify his loyalty. Right. Even if he pledged loyalty in the Corpse Blood Valley, his roots were in the righteous faction. It was too early to completely trust a guy who had only pledged loyalty half a month ago as a person of the Heaven and Earth Society. If there are grounds for suspicion, what should I do? At those words, Vice Leader Mong Xiaoqian took out a small red gourd-like object from his bosom. Then he handed it over to his son Mong Muyak. "Take this with you. Is this by any chance?" "Yes. If that guy makes contact with people from the righteous faction or shows any suspicious signs, use this. You know how to use it, right?" "Yes." How could he not know? He had witnessed its tremendous effects with his own eyes. However, he had doubts about whether this would work properly on that monster-like guy who endured even the society leader's profound true qi without letting out a single groan. While Mok Jiangun and Mong Muyak were each receiving secret orders from the Shadow Clan Master and the Vice Leader, Sip Chun, The third captain commander of the main building, who was waiting alone, muttered with a sigh and shrugged his shoulders. This is the fate of someone without backing. Seop Chun's position was different from the other 5 tigers. His family, which originated from a small to medium-sized martial arts clan and had joined the Heaven and Earth Society 20 years ago instead of during its founding, had no influence in the sect. Therefore he was like a pawn that could be used and discarded at any time. Even in this confidential mission, unlike the others who had reliable executive patrons like the vice leader or the Shadow Clan master, he had no backing to protect him in case of emergency. That meant if an unexpected situation were to occur, his sacrifice could be demanded if things took a turn for the worse. Tisk. Truly a gloomy and boring life. Lost in thought, Seop Chun furtively glanced at Mok Jae-eun. Although meeting him for the first time today, he seemed to be no ordinary guy. Should he say he was exceptional? There weren't many people who gave him this feeling. Perhaps only the eldest young master. The eldest young master, Na Yolryang. He was on a completely different level compared to the society leader's other disciples. Was this the feeling of someone walking the path of hegemony? That was the impression. However, interestingly, the same feeling emanated from Mok Jae-eun, who was only 17 years old, to a mysterious extent. He didn't seem like someone who would be under anyone. Come to think of it, if this mission was successfully completed, the society leader had promised to take him in as his 4th disciple. That meant the guy would also gain the qualification to be a successor. Although his support base was weak, Seop Chun, who had been intently watching Mok Jae-eun, faintly raised the corners of his mouth. Life is only lived once anyway. Should I take a gamble? Chapter 194, Vilti 1. In a room with only a single candle lit on the lantern, a man in his early 30s with a small stature was sitting cross-legged in front of the bed. On the bed lay a man with a handsome appearance, his right eye and head wrapped in bandages. He was none other than Na Yolryang, the chief disciple of the Heaven and Earth Society master. Na Yolryang's left eye, which had been closed as if dead, opened. Swish. Na Yolryang turned his head and looked at the man sitting cross-legged. Noticing this, the man shook his head and spoke. You really don't look good. Although he had a deep voice, the man had a peculiar voice that sounded like it belonged to a boy before puberty. Na Yolryang, who had been staring intently at this man, spoke. How long have I been like this? 3 days. 3 days. At those words, Na Yolryang snorted as if he couldn't believe it. Since reaching adulthood, he had never been particularly injured, and he had never been unconscious for this long. Grit. Everything that had happened during his confrontation with that guy flashed through his mind, including the last moment when he had turned into a poisonous human shield and embraced him. Sting. But why did his right eye hurt so much? That wasn't all. There was pain in his right wrist and right ankle as well. At this, the puzzled Na Yolryang was told by the man, clicking his tongue. Your right eyeball is gone and the bones in your right wrist and right ankle are crushed. At those words, Na Yolryang's expression distorted. More than the other injured areas, the fact that his right eyeball was gone made his nerves tingle from head to toe. This is not a pleasant feeling. It was an emotion he was experiencing for the first time. Even when he got angry, it usually ended with just a feeling of unpleasantness, but this lasted longer. Is this the emotion called rage? To Na Yolryang, who was expressing his anger like that, the man said, Since you're awake, that's a relief. Just before, that person was insisting on having a duel with the Poison King, and I had to break a sweat to dissuade him. Poison King? Yes, why did you fight with that dangerous old man in the first place? Did you suddenly want to subdue the 5 kings or whatever with force? At the man's words, one of Na Yolryang's eyebrows rose. Nevertheless, the man spoke without any fear. Did I say something wrong? If it were anyone else, no one would have been able to speak so bluntly to eldest young master Na Yolryang. However, Na Yolryang showed displeasure at the man's words but didn't directly express anger. Was it because he trusted the man that much? At that moment, Na Yolryang stared intently at the man and spoke. Does everyone know that I ended up like this? No. How is that possible? If it were a minor injury, that would be one thing, but if it became known that you suffered an injury of this extent, it would have shaken things up considerably even internally. The information had been blocked, hiding it from everyone. At the man's words, Na Yolryang let out a soft sigh and said, Then only you and that old man know about it? Yes, that person was so stubborn in coming to see you that there was no other way. The man shrugged his shoulders with a disgusted expression. At this, Na Yolriang asked, "Did you tell him not to do anything unnecessary?" "I told him to endure until you woke up if he cared about the eldest young master." "You did well." If the fact that he had suffered serious injuries had been revealed externally, quite troublesome situations would have arisen. The judgment of the man No Muyak was correct. This man, called Muyak, was the closest confidant among Na Yolriang's trusted subordinates. No, he was also the only one with whom Na Yolriang interacted freely regardless of their status. "What are you going to do?" The eye can't be helped, but even if you use a healing technique, it will take a month for the broken bones to recover." "Can you endure until you're fully healed?" "Endure? No. That was impossible. Apart from his own injuries, if that guy wasn't dealt with now, there was a high probability that he would become quite troublesome. He had witnessed him gaining enlightenment and surpassing the wall right before his eyes. He possessed monstrous talent not inferior to himself. At present he might have the upper hand, but if such a guy was left alone he would continue to grow. "I want to kill him myself, but that would be inefficient for now." There was no need to act emotionally. Anyway, since that guy had also received help from the Poison King Elder Beksaha, there would be no complaints if he moved them. Convey this to the old man. "You're going to do it after all. I don't have time to wait until I'm fully healed." At his words, Muyak shook his head as if he had expected it and said, "Of course you wouldn't. But before that it would be better to hear this first." "This first? If it's not an urgent matter." "I think it's urgent." "What do you mean?" "It seems the movements of the second young master Jang Nunge and the young lady Wai Soyun are suspicious." At those words Na Yolriang scoffed. "Leave them be. Those guys are not important. Rather, it seems they are trying to join hands." "What?" At those words Na Yolriang frowned. "What does this mean? Jang Nunge and Wai Soyun are trying to join hands? Why is that?" They were practically nemesis. Both Jang Nunge and Wai Soyun were desperate to become the successor. Why would they suddenly join hands? However, it didn't end there. "I thought the same at first, but while you were unconscious, the situation became more complicated." "Became complicated?" "Yes, last night all the executives supporting the two disciples gathered for a meeting. But they weren't the only ones. If not only them, then someone else was there too. The Poison King and the Shadow Clan Master also joined the gathering." At those words Na Yolriang's expression stiffened. Not only did all the executives supporting the second young master Jang Nunge and the young lady Wai Soyun gather for a meeting, but the Poison King and the Shadow Clan Master also joined? These bastards. Their support factions had been at a level not even worth keeping in check one by one. However, if the three of the five kings, Bright Blade King, Destroying Axe King, Annihilation Poison King, the two of the three elders, Shadow Clan Master, Water Clan Elder, and the two of the four Valley Masters, Summoning Sound Valley Master and Sun Rock Valley Master, combined their forces, the situation would be different. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that these alone had gathered a force slightly exceeding 50% of the sect's power. How did they? It was a situation that was utterly incomprehensible. These people had different goals, so they weren't the type to join hands like the two disciples. But they suddenly decided to join hands? It seems they are determined to properly confront you. Properly confront me? Yes. Otherwise, they couldn't have so cleverly taken advantage of this situation where you suffered serious injuries. It doesn't make sense for that old bastard Poison King to have done this to prepare for the situation that will unfold after you wake up. The moment he heard those words, something flashed through Na Yolriang's mind. It was none other than Mok Jiongun's face. Come to think of it, that guy Mok Jiongun had also become Elder Beksaha's disciple. If he was the joint disciple of the Shadow Clan Master and the Poison King, he could simultaneously move the two of them. Now the picture was somewhat coming together. He didn't know how he had persuaded the disciples who were like oil and water, but the one who had created this situation wasn't them. Mok Jiongun. Pardon. That guy Mok Jiongun is the one who orchestrated this. What are you talking about? If you mean Mok Jiongun, isn't he the disciple from the righteous faction hostage that the Shadow Clan Master recently accepted? Yes, that guy did it. At Na Yolriang's confident words, Muyak spoke with an incomprehensible tone. Eldest young master. Even so, that seems a bit far-fetched. What can that youngster who has only been the Shadow Clan master's disciple for a little over half a month possibly do? That youngster did this to me. A youngster did this to you. Wait, what did you just say? I said that guy did this to me. At those words, Muyak was so shocked that he stared at Na Yulriang with wide eyes. What on earth does this mean? It wasn't the Poison King who inflicted these serious injuries? That's impossible. Even if he passed the Corpse Blood Valley's gate as the top disciple, he would be at most at the danger level, so how could such a youngster? He surpassed the wall during our fight. Wall. Muyak was dumbfounded. For a moment he doubted his own ears. Wasn't that righteous faction hostage youngster only 17 years old? What do you mean by wall? That can't be. Surpassing the wall means he has reached the transformation realm. At his words, Muyak stared intently at Na Yulriang. It was definitely not a joke. No, in the first place, Na Yulriang never joked. There was no way these words coming from his mouth could be false. Muyak shook his head as if he was disgusted and said, if that's true, his growth rate is unbelievably fast. He surpassed the wall during a fight? This is really... Although he couldn't finish his words, what he was trying to say was clear. Monster. He had surpassed the limits of an ordinary human. The only beings Muyak considered as such were his lord, eldest young master Na Yulriang, and that guy who was called the strongest among the 5 tigers. But now another monster had appeared, so it was truly a calamity. Muyak, who was dumbfounded, barely managed to speak. Are you really certain that this Mok Jiangun orchestrated this situation? Although he didn't answer, Na Yulriang was certain. That guy was of the same kind as himself. This wasn't a move that could come from the minds of the 2 disciples or a stubborn old man like the Poison King. It was a move to keep him in check, no, to confront him. You who are not even the disciples want to have a proper duel with me? He truly had guts. Ha. Eldest young master? Ha. Ha ha ha. Suddenly Na Yulriang, who had been frowning, burst into crazy laughter. At that sight, Muyak couldn't hide his puzzlement. If what Na Yulriang said was true, this was a very serious matter. But why was he laughing like this? In the first place, he had rarely shown such laughter, so it seemed he was revealing it after a very long time. After laughing for a while, Na Yulriang stopped. Then, not bad. What is? Swoosh. At that moment, with a tremendous spirit and murderous intent, Na Yulriang's entire body emanated. It will be worth killing him. Finally, a prey worth hunting had appeared. Na Yulriang genuinely felt the thrill of the hunt. To think that an enemy worth staking everything on and crushing had emerged like this from within. This sense of elation was the first in a long time since that day. Na Yulriang looked at Muyak and said, from now on, I will enter the 9 Palace seclusion chamber to recover and revive my senses. What? The 9 Palace seclusion chamber? Muyak couldn't hide his inner surprise. Recovery was, of course, necessary, but entering the 9 Palace seclusion chamber meant that he would train in some way. It won't take long. Muyak, in the meantime, persuade all the remaining executives who claimed to be neutral. At those words, Muyak's eyes sparkled. He had been worried that he might lose his motivation due to the serious injuries. But if it was to this extent, there was no need to worry. Rather, it seemed that Mok Jiangun had made a mistake. Eldest young master Na Yulriang had already considered the disciples to be no match for him, so he had stopped increasing his power or keeping them in check. Such a lord had acknowledged Mok Jiangun as prey and an enemy. This was nothing short of the worst omen for that guy. Meanwhile, around the same time, in a deep forest near Chongning, Hengyan province, Mok Jiangun, Sip Chun, the 3rd captain commander of the main building, and Mong Muyak, the son of the vice leader who had been traveling north for 3 days without proper rest, using lightness skills to match the gathering time at the assembly point, decided to camp here for the first time to replenish their stamina. They had divided their roles and briefly separated from each other. Since the surroundings were damp, probably due to rain, Mong Muyak went deeper into the mountains to find dry firewood. Mok Jiangun went hunting for a meal, and Sip Chun took charge of arranging the campsite and preparing traps around it in case of an emergency. Snap. Mok Jiangun grabbed the neck of the rabbit he had spotted and twisted it. For Mok Jiangun, who had lived in the mountains for a long time, night hunting wasn't a difficult task. He already had 2 rabbits hanging from his left hand that he had caught earlier. This should be enough, right? Yes. Rabbit meat. I want to eat it after a long time. At Chong Ryong's words, Mok Jae-un said, Is that so? Then I'll knock one of them unconscious. So do you want to possess them for a while and have a meal? Who? Should I? She had been feeling stuffy being inside the wooden puppet for too long. She wanted to possess someone and have a meal for a change, like when she was at the Yun Moksword Manor. With that, Mok Jae-un returned to the designated campsite. Seop Chun seemed to have experience with this as well, as he had arranged the surroundings well. He hasn't come back yet. It seemed Mong Muyak was still gathering firewood. It wouldn't be easy to find dry branches since the wood was wet. However, why is that guy staring at us so burdensomely? At Chong Ryong's words, Mok Jae-un tilted his head. That was because as soon as Mok Jae-un appeared, Seop Chun had been staring intently at him with a suspicious expression, as if he was anxious about something. It didn't seem to be because he was hungry. If he were hungry, he should have looked at the rabbits brought back from hunting. Do you know that mortal guy has been glancing at you continuously for 3 days? More or less. It would have been strange not to notice when he was staring like that. So he had been somewhat wary, wondering if he had received a secret order from the society leader or the vice leader. Right at that moment, Seop Chun looked around and suddenly got up and approached Mok Jae-un. He didn't know what he was doing, but swish. Mok Jae-un brought his index and middle fingers together to form a sword finger seal. If he were to do something unnecessary, it would be better to deal with it in advance. However, Mok Jae-un, why are you doing this? At Mok Jae-un's question, Seop Chun approached within 5 steps and scratched his head as if he was embarrassed about something and said, I'm quite shy about these things, but... Shy? Yes. Bringing this up first to a friend younger than me is quite embarrassing. What do you want to say? Well, don't be so impatient. I said it's embarrassing. Why on earth was he acting like this? While he was puzzled, Seop Chun cleared his throat and said to Mok Jae-un, Ahem. If you become the society leader's disciple, wouldn't you need a loyal subordinate to be your right-hand man? Chapter 195, Loyalty, 2. Ahem. If you become the society leader's disciple, wouldn't you need a loyal subordinate to be your right-hand man? At the words of Seop Chun, the 3rd captain commander of the main building, Mok Jae-un couldn't hide his puzzlement. He had been wary, wondering if the glances Seop Chun had been stealing at him throughout their journey north were due to a secret order from the society leader or the vice leader. However, at this sudden question he was momentarily at a loss for words. This mortal guy is quite an interesting fellow. Interesting, you say? I wondered why he was glancing at you for 3 days, but all he wanted to say was puhaha. Chong Ryong, who had been telling him to be careful until just a moment ago, burst out laughing. Well, in a way it was something to laugh about. However, Mok Jae-un didn't take these words at face value. It could be a trap. A trap? Yes. Why do you think so? It could be a ploy to plant a spy on me. A spy? Well, that's a possibility. Chong Ryong also suddenly agreed with this. It was quite suspicious for someone they had just met for the first time due to this confidential mission to suddenly express their desire to join his subordinates. Moreover, wasn't he the captain commander who protected the society leader? At this, Mok Jae-un spoke without showing any particular change in expression. I don't know what you mean by that. You really don't know what I'm saying? Even though I said it so blatantly. Blatantly? What do you mean? At Mok Jae-un's feigned ignorance, Seop Chun scratched his head and spoke in a disappointed tone. I thought we would be on the same page, but it's disappointing. All right. What is it? No, if you say it like that, what about my position when I've expressed my desire to join under you? In the end, Seop Chun was blatantly expressing his intention. At Seop Chun's words, Mok Jae-un put down the rabbits he had hunted on the ground and said, You want to join under me? Yes. Why? Why, you ask? Didn't I just say it? If you successfully complete this mission, you'll be selected as the society leader's 4th disciple. And that's why I asked if you wouldn't need a loyal subordinate by your side? Well, at Mok Jae-un's unenthusiastic answer, Seop Chun couldn't hide his awkwardness. He had agonized for 3 days over how to express his intention and had barely taken advantage of the moment when Mong Muyak was away. However, he didn't expect such a lukewarm if not cold response. At this, Seb Chun spoke, expressing his disappointment. Do you perhaps not like me? No, that's not it. Seb Chun seemed to be a quite honest person without much greed compared to the people Mok Jae-eun had seen so far. He also had no particular pretense when interacting with others. Then why are you hesitating? I'm getting disappointed. Liking someone and trusting them are separate matters. Trust. Yes. Then you don't find me trustworthy? Do you think you can be trusted? No, why? Even though I may not look like it, I'm someone who always keeps my word once I make a promise. If I consider someone as my own, I definitely take care of them and follow them. Thump thump. Seb Chun thumped his chest, showing his confidence. At this, Mok Jae-eun spoke without any particular change in expression. Words can say anything. It's not just words. If you accept me, I'm prepared to repay that trust, no, to pledge my loyalty as your right-hand man. Is that so? That's what I'm saying. Then why do you want to join under me? At Mok Jae-eun's question, Seb Chun looked directly into his eyes. In fact, Seb Chun had also expected that if he asked to be accepted as a subordinate when they had only met recently, it would naturally raise suspicion. So instead of empty flattery, he decided to express his honest feelings. It's a gamble. A gamble. Yes. Really? What a novel answer. Mok Jae-eun chuckled. He was curious about what passionate reason or justification Seb Chun would come up with, but he never expected him to say it was a gamble. I'm sorry for saying it like this, but wanting to join under you is purely a gamble for me. The gamble? Well, I guess it could be. Yes. To be honest, even if you become the society leader's fourth disciple, that's just the beginning for you. The eldest young master and the other disciples are already running to become the successor with many supporting forces secured. And? What do you mean, and? You'll be in the most disadvantageous position if you become his disciple. You have no support base except for the Shadow Clan, your original sect, and as a former hostage from the righteous faction, it will be difficult for you to gather supporting forces. Seb Chun was expressing his opinion in an almost brutally honest manner. Of course, if revealed as it was, Seb Chun's opinion was accurate. Mok Jae-eun smiled lightly and said, I see. Don't take it too badly. I think a person who wants to be a loyal subordinate should be able to speak this frankly. Speak frankly. There's a saying that good medicine is bitter, right? Is that so? So in conclusion, you're saying you're taking a gamble because I'm in a disadvantageous position. Ahem, that's right. Then why bother going through that inconvenience? Just join under the other disciples. Don't take an unnecessary gamble. At Mok Jae-eun's outright rejection, Seb Chun spoke in a flustered manner. No. If I were going to do that, I would have done it long ago. It's not too late. If there's a disciple you like. There isn't. Pardon. I said there isn't. A disciple I like. At his words, Mok Jae-eun asked in puzzlement, why isn't there anyone you like? They're just all a bit, you know. What do you mean by, all a bit? At this question, Seb Chun sighed and caught his breath before answering. This is just between us, but I don't like the second young master, Jang Nung-ik, because he has the least talent among the other successors and is crafty. And the young lady Wai So-yeon has decent talent and seems desperate in everything, but it's like she's being swayed by her subordinates, should I say? Who? For a guardian of the main building, he had a surprisingly accurate assessment. At this, Mok Jae-eun asked, what about the eldest young master? It's ambiguous. Ambiguous, you say? He lacks human touch. I can understand that as someone walking the path of hegemony, but there are too many talented people around him, so I don't think there's a place for me. There wouldn't be no place for you. I just don't want to be satisfied with simply joining their subordinates like a nobody. Most of the disciples already have later generation disciples from prestigious martial arts families within the sect serving them. At those words, Mok Jae-eun asked in puzzlement, aren't you also one of the 5 Tigers? The 5 Tigers was a title given only to the top later generation disciples. With such a title and being the 3rd captain commander of the main building, anyone would have no choice but to make use of him. Or so he thought, but no. There's a limit because I have no backing. Backing. Unlike them, I'm from a small to medium-sized martial arts family, so there's a limit. Even if I join under those who already have loyal subordinates, there's a ceiling to how high I can rise. You're quite honest. Of course. Even if I join under someone, my goal is to be recognized and succeed within that group. As his words ended, Chong Ryong's voice echoed in Mok Jae-un's ear. He's a guy I like. You like him? He has pure desires like honor and success. And fundamentally, he's very honest with his own emotions. A guy like this will risk his life for a master who recognizes his worth. Your evaluation of him is quite positive. That's how it seems to me. What about you? I don't dislike him. But I'm still not sure. Do you have doubts? Yes. The timing was not appropriate. If it were a different moment rather than during this confidential mission, or if he weren't the Guardian Commander who protected the society leader, he might have found it intriguing at this point. It was rare to find a pawn who willingly offered their loyalty. So are you going to just ignore him? Or keep him at a distance? I think I'll put him through a proper verification process. Verification? In what way? It's enough to confirm that he's not a person of the society leader or the vice leader. Confirmation? While Chong Ryong was puzzled, Mok Jae-un said to Seop Chun. So you're saying you want to be with me even though I still have no support base and there seem to be many vacant positions around me? At these words, Seop Chun scratched his head as usual and said, Vacant positions. Yes, I can't deny that's not the case, but that's not all there is to it. If that's not all, then what is it? Should I say it's just a feeling? A feeling. Yes, I'm unexpectedly good at reading people, and you're definitely not someone who will be under anyone. Mok Jae-un smiled without a word. It was a sign of affirmation. At his reaction, the corners of Seop Chun's mouth twitched. As expected, this guy had the side to him. Those who had limits or lacked self-confidence only hid their true selves, but this fellow didn't do that. This was precisely the quality of a leader walking the path of hegemony in his view. That's why I wanted to gamble on you. If you're someone who can even surprise the society leader, one of the six heavens, I think you can even defeat that monstrous eldest young master. You're giving me too much credit. I'm not giving you too much credit. It's reality, isn't it? This isn't empty flattery. I'm saying this because I really think so. Thank you for that. Seop Chun, who seemed to have loosened up compared to earlier, asked expectantly, Ahem. Then can you accept me as your right-hand man? That would be difficult. At those words, Seop Chun spoke in a deflated voice. Well, even though I'm talking like I'll give you my liver and gallbladder, you should at least say you'll consider it. Words can say anything. No. Then should I perform honorable suicide ritual right here for you to believe me? There's no need for that. I'm just stating a fact. A fact. Yes. At those words, Seop Chun asked in puzzlement, What do you mean by that? I already have people who are like my right and left arms. At this, Seop Chun frowned. What does this mean again? He's saying he already has loyal subordinates like his right and left arms? Could they be subordinates assigned by the Shadow Clan? No. Then were there fellow disciples in the Corpse Blood Valley who showed interest in you? There are those too. Hey. Yes. No matter what, I'm a talented person who can be considered among the top 5 later generation disciples of the Heaven and Earth Society, so isn't it a bit much to compare me with those youngsters who are still immature? Seop Chun spoke in a disappointed tone. At this, Mok Jae-un chuckled and answered, Both of them are stronger than you. What? No, who on earth are they? Who is stronger than me? Seop Chun asked as if he couldn't understand and was frustrated. At this, Mok Jae-un shrugged and said, I can't tell you that. You're not my person yet. Are you doing this on purpose? On purpose. I have confidence that I can work hard and support you like crazy so that you can become the best. You should give the right-hand man position to someone like me. Seop Chun sincerely wanted to become Mok Jae-un's most loyal subordinate among his subordinates. That was why he was already betting on him who had no power or anything. That's far from enough. Arg. This is frustrating. Then should I crawl like a dog if you tell me to, or even lick your soles? That's obviously what you should do. What? Seop Chun stared at Mok Jae-un with a dumbfounded look. Does this guy think a right-hand man is some kind of slave? He was about to let out a hollow laugh because it was so absurd, but if you want to be a right-hand man, shouldn't you be prepared to at least do this much? There were conditions too. Ah. All right. Tell me. I'll show you that I'm prepared to go that far. You should be able to serve me in life and death, and sometimes, if necessary, you should be able to become a woman too. Seop Chun narrowed his eyes and stared intently at Mok Jae-eun. Was he playing word games with him? This was no different from telling him to give up on the right-hand man position. Is this a joke? Does it seem like a joke? Ha. Seop Chun let out a deep sigh. Then he clasped his hands together and spoke in an earnest voice. If you're saying things that are so incomprehensible, it seems like you already have a designated person for the right-hand man position, so at least make me your left-hand man. I need to be given at least that much to have the motivation to serve you. I didn't consider such things, but since you ask, it seems like I have someone who is like a left-hand man too. Ha. How great must the person who becomes your left-hand man be that even that position is already designated? Should I say they have waited for me for generations? To be precise, they had waited for Chong Ryung. However, if it was loyalty that spanned generations to that extent, they could be trusted. At Mok Jae-eun's words, Seop Chun snorted as if he couldn't believe it. As far as he knew, it had only been a little over a month since he had been captured as a hostage from the righteous faction, so where would there be someone who would pledge loyalty to him for generations? Do you dislike me that much? No. I like you. If you like me, why are you making such absurd jokes and refusing to accept me as a subordinate? Do I have a reason to joke? At Mok Jae-eun's serious tone, Seop Chun frowned. He couldn't understand this guy's true intentions at all. He even thought that he might have done something unnecessary by saying he was taking a gamble. At that moment, Mok Jae-eun said, "If you prove one thing, I don't know about being a right-hand man or a left-hand man, but I think I can accept you as my person. No. You should at least give me the right-hand man position. I want that position even out of spite. I told you it's impossible. Isn't that too much? If it's to this extent, you should say you'll give it to me. It's already decided." Seop Chun was gradually losing steam. Ha. This is really too much. At this, Mok Jae-eun smiled faintly and said, "If you want the right-hand man position that much, work hard for generations. If you're lucky, someone from your descendants might become the right-hand man." At these words, Seop Chun raised his voice in an angry tone. "Forget it. I'll just give up. What do you mean descendants? What's the point if I can't become the right-hand man myself? Don't be so hung up on such things." "Hung up, you say? I'm betting on you, so you could at least give me that much of a position. It's not a gamble but properly lining up." "What?" At Mok Jae-eun's arrogant expression, Seop Chun's eyes changed. "Properly lining up," he said? Then does this guy have the ambition to properly aim for the successor position? He felt a strange sense of elation at the thought of seeing a bit of his unknown intentions, but then Mok Jae-eun said, "So do you have any intention of proving it?" At Mok Jae-eun's question, Seop Chun controlled himself inwardly. Right. Who would take it at face value if he asked to be made a right-hand man after only knowing each other for 3 days? What was important right now was to have this guy acknowledge his abilities and loyalty. If he continued to show such an attitude, his thoughts might change. He talked as if he had something, but how many people in the Heaven and Earth Society would side with this guy? In the end, he would have no choice but to acknowledge him. "All right. I'll do it. I'll do anything, so tell me." It seems he's coming over there." Huh. The sound of rustling and a familiar presence was felt not far away. It seemed Mong Mu-yak, the son of the vice leader, had found dry firewood. But what does he mean by, "it seems"? While he was puzzled, Mok Jae-eun raised the corners of his mouth coldly and spoke in a meaningful voice. "Kill Mong Mu-yak." Chapter 196, Loyalty 3. Mok Jae-eun said with a sardonic smile. "Kill Mong Mu-yak." Seop Chun's expression instantly hardened. He had been curious as to what Mok Jae-eun would demand of him to prove his loyalty. But this was a request he truly did not anticipate. Seop Chun whispered urgently, "Hey, are you doing this on purpose?" "On purpose? No matter how much you want me to demonstrate my resolve for loyalty, killing Mong Mu-yak right now is not." "Humph." At his words, Mok Jae-eun scoffed. Then he said, "It's all just talk after all." Seop Chun's brow furrowed at those words. Could it be that this wasn't just testing him but he really meant for him to kill? Suddenly, Seop Chun's eyes met Mok Jae-eun's. For a moment he felt a chill run through his entire body. It was truly unsettling. This bastard. Was he really in his right mind? Hey, we're in the middle of a secret mission. Are you not considering that? So what? What do you mean so what? If Mong Muyak dies, how will we make contact with the advance team at the first rendezvous point and get help from the direct subordinates of the society leader in the Imperial Palace? Are you even listening to me? I wonder. Don't give me that. Proving loyalty. I can do that however you want. But killing Mong Muyak, the son of the vice leader, right now means making both the vice leader and the society leader your enemies. Are you not thinking about that at all? Zip Chun could not understand. Since they hadn't completed the mission yet, he hadn't become the society leader's fourth disciple. But making such a demand as if he were already the fourth disciple and engaging in an internal power struggle was the worst judgment. Think carefully. This really won't do. That's troublesome. What? All this advice and whatnot is fine, but fundamentally, I want a dog that follows its master's commands without question. And you seem unfit for that. You. Flinch. Suddenly Sip Chun's eyes met Mok Jaeungun's. He hadn't been aware of it until now, but he understood why this guy gave off a similar feeling to the eldest young master. Even while saying such arrogant and provocative words, there was no emotion felt in his eyes. To the perplexed Sip Chun, Mok Jaeungun said, "Only about 13 or 14 are left now." The bushes rustled as footsteps approached. Soon Mong Muyak would arrive here. It meant to make a decision. He's crazy. Fucking insane. If we really kill Mong Muyak, not only will the mission get screwed up, but everything will be messed up. No matter how much it's to prove loyalty, this is too much. Making enemies before we even start. Many thoughts flashed through Sip Chun's mind in an instant. Proving loyalty. There must be other ways he could prove his loyalty to this bastard. But insisting on killing Mong Muyak, the son of the vice leader, even at the risk of such a reckless move. He didn't trust me from the beginning. That was it. The reason Mok Jaeungun gave this order was simple. It was because of his position. As the third captain commander of the inner fortress, he could be acquainted with other successors and frequently contact those in power. Furthermore, he could be considered a person close to the vice leader. Taking all this into account, Mok Jaeungun had no choice but to be suspicious of him even if he pledged loyalty. But what if he killed the vice leader's son here? Putting aside the situation from his point of view, I become a trustworthy person the moment I make the vice leader my enemy. Is that it? There was no better way to test loyalty. Because by doing this he too would become an enemy of the vice leader. Damn it. He understood the intention, but it was extremely troublesome. Even if he proved his loyalty, if he did such a thing, he might lose any prospects as a successor even if he became the society leader's disciple. Was he really prepared to handle that? This was a test and a trial. Come to think of it, he seemed to have taken it too seriously. Unless Mok Jaeungun was an idiot, there was no way he wouldn't know what he was worried about. If that was the case. Right. He just wants to see my resolve. Sip Chun now believed he understood Mok Jaeungun's true intention. He meant that if he could confirm that he would kill even the vice leader's son without question at his command, he could trust him. But this bastard wouldn't really intend to kill Mong Muyak right away. If he did that, there would be more to lose than to gain. Then it's different. As long as he showed his resolve, that would be enough. This bastard would prevent the worst-case scenario. Still, he had to show that he followed orders, so although it didn't suit his style, he would have to put on a show of being at odds with Mong Muyak. All right. I'll do it. Sip Chun said to Mok Jaeungun. To this, Mok Jaeungun shrugged and replied. I told you words alone are meaningless. I said I'll do it. Don't nag. Rustle. Soon Mong Muyak appeared carrying dry firewood using spare clothes. Mong Muyak, who was already a man of few words, silently looked at the 3 rabbits lying on the ground. He got them. Although he didn't show it, he was hungry after 3 days of fasting. While it was said that high-level martial artists could control their appetite to some extent through qi circulation or internal energy, if there was no food intake, prolonged fasting would inevitably lead to difficulty. Mong Muyak said to them, Who will start the fire? He asked this, but the one he was looking at was Sip Chun. It meant for Sip Chun to start it. At his words, Sip Chun approached Mong Muyak without a word and said, You managed to get them? Good work. As expected, there was no response. At Mong Muyak's attitude, Sip Chun felt slightly irritated. Anyway, this bastard doesn't know how others feel. No, this is good. He was hesitant to attack him outright, but if he provoked him like this, it would serve as a suitable justification and he could act emotionally. Phew. Whatever. Give me the firewood. With that, Sip Chun reached out to Mong Muyak to receive the firewood. Then, instead of handing it over directly, Mong Muyak put the firewood he was carrying down on the ground, as if telling him to pick it up himself. Thud. Figure it out yourself. And he tried to turn around. That moment. Pick it up. Mong Muyak, who was turning his body, furrowed his brow. Even when he usually acted cold, Sip Chun only grumbled and left it at that. But now those words were laced with a sharp edge. Was he very upset? Well, they had been heading north for 3 days straight without rest while fasting, so everyone was tired and on edge. Should I just pick it up for him? No. Although he had the thought that it was possible, he didn't feel like picking it up for him. The moment he picked it up, it would be like he was yielding. At this, Mong Muyak retorted sharply. Don't be so sensitive over such a... It was at that very moment. Whoosh. Sip Chun launched himself toward Mong Muyak. It was such a sudden attack that Mong Muyak was startled for a moment and tried to gain distance. But Sip Chun's sword strike infused with chi had already grazed his left shoulder. Ugh. What are you doing? Mong Muyak, whose shoulder was cut, twisted his body with footwork and hurriedly threw a kick at Sip Chun. Of course, Sip Chun easily dodged it by twisting his body. As soon as he dodged, Sip Chun's left-hand sword energy struck Mong Muyak's abdomen. Bang. Ku. Whoosh. Mong Muyak's body was pushed back about 5 steps from the sword energy he received. Mong Muyak's expression distorted terribly. Up until the first strike, he thought it was an attack made out of an emotionally agitated impulse. However, the sword energy just now to the abdomen went beyond that. As a result, he suffered internal injuries. Cough. Drip, drip. Dark blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Let's have a go at it. You son of a bitch. Whoosh. Mong Muyak, his eyes wild with internal injuries, launched himself at Sip Chun. Bam 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 bam. In an instant, the two masters who had earned the title of 5 tigers, clashed for about 10 exchanges. They didn't draw their unique weapons, the sword and saber, but they raised their chi and aimed for each other's vital points as if to kill. Being like troublemakers in the main sect, they knew each other quite well. Therefore each move was close to a stalemate. Bam 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 bam. Up to nearly 30 seconds into the confrontation, neither of them was pushed back. However, even if they possessed equal martial arts, as the confrontation dragged on, superiority gradually began to show. Ichinenji. Little by little wounds appeared on Mong Muyak's body. On the other hand, Sip Chun had not been grazed even once by Mong Muyak's sword energy. This gave a hint as to who was more intuitive, experienced and skilled between the two. Sip Chun was about half a step ahead. Swish shik. Sip Chun, who had cut part of Mong Muyak's back with flashy footwork, glanced at Mok Jaeongun. Mong Muyak's clothes were gradually being stained with blood. If the confrontation dragged on, he was likely to win. You saw that, right? Although they didn't use swords and sabers, they didn't hold back against each other, so he thought this much was enough to prove his resolve. He hoped Mok Jaeongun would tell them to stop soon. However, what the? Mok Jaeon was leaning against a tree with his arms crossed, just watching, with a look in his eyes that seemed not very pleased. At this, Sip Chun felt incredulous. It's dangerous if we go on. He had already grasped most of the weaknesses in Mong Muyak's swordsmanship. If he put his mind to it, he was confident he could end the match within 3 moves. Of course, that ending meant the process of driving the opponent to death. How else do you want me to prove it? Now that you've confirmed my resolve, tell us to stop. Sip Chun blatantly gave Mok Jaeongun a look. Wasn't this enough? However, Mok Jaeongun made a gesture of slitting his own throat. Seeing this, Sip Chun's eyes wavered. What? He wasn't going to stop them, and what did that gesture mean? Could this bastard really mean for him to kill Mong Muyak? He's out of his mind. If Mong Muyak died, everything would be messed up. Even before properly starting the successors' battle, he might end up with enemies and be unable to do anything. Siep Chun used lip reading to say this was not it. This much is enough. We have to stop here. If we go any further, everything will. It was at that very moment. In an instant of their fierce clash, someone intervened between them. At that moment, Siep Chun's eyes widened as if they would tear. Something brushed past and fell to the ground. It was Erg. None other than Mong Muyak's left arm. A scream erupted from Mong Muyak's mouth as his arm was severed below the elbow. He could endure it if it was just a wound, but the pain of having an arm cut off was beyond imagination. Siep Chun turned his head with an exasperated look. There stood Mok Jaungun, raising his chi-infused hand with an indifferent gaze. You really? Do my words sound like a joke to you? The vice leader. If you really kill the vice leader's son, the aftermath. Do you think stalling and pretending is proving loyalty? For a moment, Siep Chun was at a loss for words. It seemed he had misjudged this bastard. This Mok Jaun wasn't just similar to the eldest young master Na Yel Riang, but beyond him. Siep Chun was stunned for a moment. Did I make the worst gamble of my life? This wasn't the picture he wanted. He didn't want to step on a landmine from the start, but rather wanted to start together with this bastard even if he had no foundation. To the perplexed Siep Chun, Mok Jaungun smiled and tapped his own head. Don't use your head. I don't want a dog that interprets things on its own. When I give a command to bite, I want a dog that can thoroughly tear out the opponent's throat. I said words are meaningless, didn't I? Mok Jaungun pointed at Mong Muyak with a flick of his finger. The meaning was very clear. He meant to finish it. Ugh. Mong Muyak, holding the severed end of his arm and suffering, took faltering steps backward. For the first time he spoke with a face full of fear. Why are you doing this? Siep Chun's expression distorted even more as he watched this sight. The milk had already been spilled. Although he had held back, he had pushed Mong Muyak to the brink, and even if he hadn't done it himself, he had even cut off his arm. At that point there was no way to salvage the situation. My resolve was half-baked. It seemed that from the moment he wanted to become the right-hand man of the one who had to walk the path of a villain, he should have been prepared for such an outcome. Clench. Siep Chun, who had been biting his lip hard, finally sighed and, drew his unique weapon, the Guangmudo. Resent me. He apologized to Mong Muyak in his mind. Although they had no relationship of grudges, from the moment he tried to join Mok Jaungun's ranks, he had crossed a river of no return. Siep Chun swung his saber at the neck of Mong Muyak, who was stepping back trying to escape. His single saber strike, devoid of any distracting thoughts, held not a shred of hesitation. Clang! That moment. His single saber strike, aiming to sever Mong Muyak's head in one breath, stopped right in front of him. Siep Chun looked at Mok Jaungun with widened eyes. Because the one who had blocked the Guangmudo's blade was none other than Mok Jaungun's hand. Siep Chun stared at him with an expression of incomprehension. To him Mok Jaungun said, "Just do it." What? Tiski. If you had been like this from the beginning, there would have been no need to even cut off his arm. You. Flinch. For a moment, Siep Chun, who was about to say something out of disbelief, couldn't continue his words. The moment he saw that face full of malice, with a smile reaching his ears, a chill running up his spine kept his lips from moving.